A soft, rhythmic light pulsed in the eternal darkness of the cryobay. It washed over the face of Ripley, suspended in the silent dream of her hypersleep chamber. Her expression was one of hard-won peace, etched with an exhaustion that went down to the marrow. It was the face from the end, the face of a survivor who had just escaped hell, only to be locked away for the long voyage home. Her voice, a low and weary murmur born of dreaming, filtered through the hum of the Sulaco's dormant systems. It was an ending, wasn't it? A bit like when I went into hypersleep before, when I fought the beast. But this time, I knew I'd never see my fucking cat again. Poor Jonesy. Me, Newt, Hicks, and what's left of Bishop were on a journey into the unknown. Again. The soft light on her sleeping face seemed to dissolve, its clinical glow melting, warming, transforming into the harsh, flat light of a shuttle cabin. The black straps bit into the shoulders of her flight suit. It wasn't pain, not yet. It was a promise of it. The shuttle hummed, a deep, planetary vibration she felt in her teeth, in the fillings she'd gotten just last week. Berlin felt 1,000,000 miles away already. A klaxon blared sharp and final. The hum deepened into a roar. Pressure. It slammed into her chest, a giant's palm pressing her back into the form-fitting seat. Her breath left in a sharp, "Ha!" The sky in the viewport, a clear, serene blue, began to darken at the edges, bruising to indigo. The roar was everything. It was in her bones. It shook the vision in her eyes. She tried to swallow, couldn't. Her breathing, out of sync with the machine's fury, came in ragged, audible pulls. Huh, huh, huh. It was the sound of effort, of being crushed and exhilarated at once. The blue was gone now, replaced by a black so absolute it seemed a solid thing rushing at them. A final, titanic shudder rocked the craft, and then silence. The pressure vanished. The roar was gone, replaced by a ringing, profound quiet. Her body floated against the straps, suddenly, terrifyingly light. The breath she'd been holding exploded from her in a gasp that was half sob. Huh. Huh. Before her, in the curved viewport, was Earth. A marble. A perfect swirling marble of blue and white and rusty brown, hanging in the infinite black. It was beautiful. It was the most beautiful, fragile, lonely thing she had ever seen. She had left it. Her breath hitched again, a soft, wet sound in the sterile air. She thought she might be sick. She thought she might cry. A sound formed in her throat, born of the crushing G-force and the sudden absence, born of awe and a terror so deep it felt like falling. Fuck! The sound died, replaced by the soft crush of pine needles underfoot. The air was cold and damp, smelling of wet earth and fir trees. A low mist clung to the trunks of the towering pines in the Grunewald. Her daughter's small hand was in hers, warm and solid. Amanda, 7 years old in a bright red coat, was a slash of color in the gray-green world. What? Amanda's voice was small, confused. She stopped walking, forcing Ripley to stop too. Her little girl's face looked up, eyes wide. Am I just supposed to stay in Berlin? With Tante Clara? Ripley knelt. The damp of the forest floor seeped through the knee of her trousers. She took Amanda's other hand. Her daughter's fingers were so small. No, honey. You'll go to school. You'll be with Clara and Opa will visit. It's just for a little while. But why do you have to go up there? Amanda's gaze lifted, as if she could see the shuttle already burning through the atmosphere above the mist. Ripley followed her look, her eyes tracing the gray sky between the pines. She pulled Amanda closer, until their foreheads almost touched. She could feel the child's quick breath on her face. She spoke the words softly, a secret for just the two of them in the vast, quiet forest. Because it's not safe in space, Amanda. The words hung in the mist, a promise, a warning, a lie she was telling them both. The silence of the shuttle cabin was absolute. The marble of Earth turned slowly, silently, in its sea of endless night. Ripley stared at it, her breath finally steadying, frosting the inside of her faceplate for a second before clearing. The visceral memory of the forest, the smell, the chill, the feel of small fingers, bled away, leaving only the consuming void. She had left the safe, green world for the unsafe, black one, for a company, for a paycheck, to keep a red coat on a small girl an impossible distance away. The shuttle sped on, a speck of metal and warm life hurled into the cold, silent unknown. Her journey had begun. In the neighboring chamber, Newt lay still in hypersleep. Something was deep inside her mind. The dream began with her feet on solid ground, real ground. Not deck plating, but the soft, gray dust of Acheron. She was in a line, her brother Timmy scuffing his boots ahead of her, her mother and father walking just in front, their voices a low, familiar murmur in the vast, cathedral silence of the alien derelict. "Seen the way you look at Kelly," her mother was saying, a playful tease in her voice that sounded so wrong in this place. "I'm jealous of her breasts, Russ. I wish she could rub some off and give it to me. Can't compete with that." Her father's chuckle was a dry, nervous sound. "Don't be silly, Anne. Yours are just fine." Timmy turned his head, a smirk on his face. "Remember when you farted at Sophie's birthday party, Newt? And all your girlfriends laughed?" Heat rushed to Newt's cheeks. "It's rude to point the finger," she mumbled, glaring at his back. Her mother glanced over her shoulder at Timmy, but mainly at her. It wasn't a scolding look. It was a look of shared, quiet concern. A mother who felt the sting of the tease for her daughter, who remembered the cruel, amplifying spotlight of childhood embarrassment. Trying, with a single glance, to build a wall of normalcy between her children, in a place that screamed that nothing would ever be normal again. Her eyes were wide, the whites showing all around the iris. Then her father stopped dead. "Holy shit!" Newt looked past him. It filled the far end of the chamber, fused to its command chair, like a fossilized king on a grotesque throne. The space jockey. Its chest was a frozen eruption of petrified ribs and ancient leathery hide, burst outward in a silent scream. The air around it seemed to throb, thick and oily. "Don't touch anything," her father whispered, but he was already moving closer, drawn by a horrified curiosity. Her mother followed, her earlier teasing utterly gone. She moved as if in a trance, stepping over the ossified coils of the ship's biomechanical innards. "Russ, wait!" She reached a hand out, not to touch the giant pilot, but as if to feel the air around it. The contact wasn't physical, it was psychic. A silent, telepathic shriek tore through Anne's mind and flooded the chamber. Newt felt it as a pressure in her own skull, a high-pitched whine that was all pain. Her mother stiffened, a choked gasp escaping her lips. Her eyes rolled back, showing the whites. Then, the images. They slammed into Newt through her mother's connection. Broken, visceral snapshots. A bustling hive of eggs, not in a lone chamber, but in a vast, dripping catacomb that pulsed with a malignant life. The jockey's ship, sleek and intact, screaming through the void. Not a courier, but a bomber. Its cargo was purpose, not accident. A sudden alarm. A frantic scramble in a biomechanical cockpit. An emergency landing, violent, skidding, tearing a wound across the planet's face. A breach. A facehugger, pale and spidery, launching from a ruptured canister in the hold. Not one egg, but hundreds, now compromised. Crewmates, other jockeys taller, slimmer. Panic. A choice. They fled, abandoning their pilot, sealing him in with the contagion. He was not alone, he was left alone, to die, to contain it. The final agonizing weight, strapped in. Feeling the thing growing inside and the pressure, the bursting, the eternal fossilized scream, the torrent ceased as abruptly as it began. Anne crumpled to the dusty floor, a line of drool tracing from her slack mouth. The psychic echo faded, leaving only the oppressive, ancient silence. But the knowledge remained, imprinted on the dream, on Newt's soul. She understood now. This wasn't a tomb they had stumbled into. It was a quarantine, a warning. And her family had just broken the seal. In her cryotube aboard the Sulaco, Newt's small body twitched, her brow furrowed in a deep, trapped frown. Her journey into the dark had not begun with the aliens in the processor. It had begun here, in the derelict, in the moment her mother touched a dead god's pain and passed the curse onto her daughter. Laying in hypersleep, Hicks awoke on a 20th century cruise ship, a time he knew little about, that he'd only seen in old videos and brittle photographs. A floating city of white paint and gleaming brass? It was wrong. The sun was warm on the teak decks, the air salty and clean. People in bright, strange clothes strolled and laughed, the sound tinny and distant. It was calm, too calm. A deep, operational silence hummed beneath the human noise, the kind that sets a soldier's teeth on edge. He was a ghost. He walked the promenades, through couples leaning on rails, through waiters carrying trays of frothing drinks. Their forms shimmered as he passed, unseeing. He was a silent witness, a scanner without a weapon. He walked onto a wide entertainment floor with a pool, and a man and a woman stood gazing at each other in the water. There were not many people around, and she ran her hands over his chest and said, "You have a nice chest, you can touch mine too." The man looked at her cheekily, his face beaming with a smile. "No, I can't, we might get caught." She giggled and said, "Don't worry, there's barely anyone around." He moved on instinct, descending from the sun-drenched pools to the carpeted lounges, through layers of the ship down into the clinical white corridors of the crew areas. The air grew cooler, smelling of bleach and stale grease. He passed the kitchen, a cacophony of shouts and hissing steam, and found a heavy unlocked door marked Provisions. He pushed it open. The room was a cavern of shadow, stacked with crates of vegetables and sacks of flour. And there, in a corner where the cold storage met the hull, was a spread of living decay. A patch of the floor was not floor, but a weeping resinous crust. Nestled within it, leathery and pulsing softly, were eggs. A cold certainty seized him. What were they doing on board the ship? This was a breach, a contamination of the simplest, most terrible kind. A door clanged shut down the hall. Hicks turned. A man in stained whites, a chef, stumbled out of a bathroom, wiping his damp face with a towel. The man's eyes were unfocused, confused. He didn't remember passing out on the tiles. He dried his hands on his apron and shuffled back towards the kitchen's light and noise, oblivious to the tenant in his gut. Hicks followed, his ghost heart hammering. The chef returned to his station, picked up a knife, and stared blankly at a pile of carrots. Then his face paled. A tremor ran through him. He dropped the knife with a clatter, clutched his stomach, and vomited a thin, clear fluid into a steel sink. He began to shake, a violent, bone-deep rattling. A stain, first a blossom of wetness, then a deep spreading red, appeared on the front of his white tunic. He looked down, eyes wide with a question that would never be answered, as something rippled under the fabric, then tore through it. Hicks turned away. The mission was over. The containment had failed. He ascended back into the world of the living, moving through the passengers. A woman complained of a headache. A child cried for no reason. He could sense it now, the danger humming in the air, a frequency only he could hear. The spacious ballroom began to blur, the people laughing and dancing smearing into a carousel of meaningless color and sound. Hours seemed to pass in the blink of an eye. He found himself near the ship's offices. A young crew member in a crisp uniform stood inside a glass-walled office, looking out at the corridor, checking a watch. A shadow detached itself from the ceiling above the door. It dropped with a liquid grace. A tail, sleek and bladed, lashed out. There was a heavy, meaty thud against the inside of the glass, followed by a soft, terrible splat. A crimson web erupted across the pristine pane, then began to drip in thick rivulets. The people outside, a man and woman deep in conversation, walked past without a glance. They didn't see the shape moving in the red haze behind the glass. They only absent-mindedly stepped around the droplets, falling from the doorframe onto the carpet. Panic, cold and pure, flooded Hicks's veins. This was the fight. This was the engagement. And he was not in it. He saw a woman in a blue dress, humming, walking down a side corridor toward a service hatch that hung slightly ajar. From the darkness within, a sleek, domed head tilted, dripped. No! Hicks's voice was a raw, silent scream in the dream. He lunged for her, his hand aiming for her shoulder to yank her back. His fingers passed through the fabric of her dress, through the flesh and bone beneath, meeting no resistance. He was nothing. A memory of a soldier. A ghost with a ghost's command. He could only watch as she walked, smiling, into the waiting dark. The soft, rhythmic light continued to pulse in the cryobay, a silent metronome counting the long, dark way home. Around it, the three survivors slept on. They did not rest. They traveled backwards into memory, forwards into fear, and sideways into the nightmares that now defined them, the sacrifice, the curse, and the helpless witness. Their journey into the unknown had not paused. It had simply turned inward.